All right, what's going on? It's a late night edition, Patriots Press Pass. John Zannis, Taylor Kyles, here to break down a lot of the stuff that's going on at the NFL owners' meetings, and there is a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. What started kind of tame with the classic Bill Belichick, like grumpy. I'm not going to tell you anything press conference, but there were still some nuggets there. Turned friggin' wild when Robert Kraft just started running his mouth about Lamar Jackson. So things got really interesting and really funny. So we're here to break it down with you guys, talk about what's real, what's not real, what is, what could be. Taylor Kyles has his opinions on Lamar Jackson.
I always do.
Both in terms of what it could look like on the field, whether or not it's feasible, whether or not the Patriots can do it. But again, alarm bells kind of went off today when the story kind of came out. Especially Kraft spoke after Belichick. I thought a lot of people, Taylor, I think, thought he might put him on notice like he did a couple years ago, like this isn't acceptable. But instead, he kind of sleeked this out. It's also interesting how he did it. So we'll talk about how the whole day went down and get your take on things. Listen to you guys in the comments. By all means, fire away when you got stuff to talk about, and we'll put it up there on the screen as well. Tell you real quick, the podcast, as always, sponsored by FanDuel, our exclusive wagering partners. Go to fanduel.com/Boston and take advantage of this special offer. Get $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 wager. So go check that out. So let's start off the day. I mean, it's burying the lead. I don't want to bury the lead here. Let's just get to it. A lot of interesting things between Kraft and Belichick regarding just, again, little nuggets, and you got to read between the lines a lot here to see how this stuff goes. So we'll talk about it, how Bill talked about, how Bill talked about things, how Kraft talked about some of the same topics, and that would have been what we would have done, go back and forth. But then what happens, Kraft's kind of done talking, and, he's just holding court informally with a few people, and he just kind of leaks out there that, I guess, friggin', Meek Mill texted him, and there it is, and says Lamar Jackson's available. Lamar Jackson wants to be here, according to Meek Mill, and then they follow up and say, well, are you going to do that? And he's like, oh, that's up to Bill. That's friggin' wild to me. It took a while for that to set in, both the possibility that Lamar Jackson wants to play here, but also what is Kraft doing? This is like drunk ownership.
He's on some Irsay. He's on his Irsay flow right now.
He just hung Bill out to dry and just put it out there. Like, I love Mac, but yeah, we could have Lamar, I guess, but that's Bill's thing. Talk to him. Okay, so here you go. So you got this. So what do you make of it?
Man, that was just crazy, honestly, because you texted me, and at first I thought the phrasing was was something like, oh, he would play for the Patriots or whatever, not as serious. But seeing it, man, I'm still kind of processing, and I still want to leave room in my brain for saying, like, maybe he said it in jest. Like, maybe he truly is just an older man who's kind of just saying whatever he wants. But also, like, that's not Kraft. Like, Kraft is pretty, measured in his words usually. I don't think he would say something that extreme as a joke when he's talking to reporters. Either way, he put Bill in a really weird position. And he also he didn't contradict himself. But minutes earlier, like a half hour before that, he was saying, I believe in Mac. I think we've given him the pieces to succeed. He's in a better position. And while those two things can be true at the same time, it was just a wild pivot from seeming to be like, yeah, no, Mac's our guy, which, he didn't say that explicitly, but said, he believed in him and was a fan. And then to just go, not 180, but like at least like a hard 90 and be like, yeah, but also maybe we're going to get Lamar if Bill says so. And even said earlier that like Bill's the one who runs the football team. So to a degree, that's what he was saying for all those kinds of questions. He made his feelings known, but said at the end of the day, like Bill runs everything and he's been doing a pretty good job. Also, the fact that, it's not like Bill being not candid is new or surprising. But you think about it, if they were talking about acquiring Lamar Jackson, would he be like just, kind of coy, or would he be defensive? And when asked about like acquiring other players, he put his foot down, albeit like he was being asked to an annoying degree. And I could see where he just got to the point where he was just like, no, like seriously, I'm not talking about any of this. But he was adamant that he wasn't talking about anybody that wasn't on the roster. As you've been, trying to hammer in my head for the past couple weeks, he has not committed to Mac Jones since midseason, which again, as you pointed out, he did last year. And he said that Mac was the quarterback going into last season. It just didn't follow through, obviously, throughout the whole season because Mac was turning it over too much and deserved to be questioned. Bailey Zappi came in and did well, albeit against inferior competition with better game planning. And then Mac stopped making mistakes, but they still struggled because there were a billion other things that were wrong. So, it's interesting because while I do think that Mac can be a Pro Bowl guy, you still have the option now that it's on the table, I guess, to get someone who's proven he can be an MVP, still has room to go as a passer in a good way, and has already taken huge strides. And then you have Mac Jones, who could be good, but you still don't know what he is necessarily at this level. So it's interesting. And honestly, with Kraft putting it all the way out there, like I'm the guy who doesn't like to talk about, if this, then that, because it's just, at some point, it feels like a waste of breath. But man, it's the offseason. And, Kraft said what he said. So now we're talking about it. And, you can't just ignore it.
Yeah, you cannot ignore it. But it's like it got in. I mean, again, why say it is the craziest thing to me is like, what do you gain here? Like, it makes no sense. And like the manner in which he said it makes me think that he wants it out there and wasn't asked about it as Bill was, and Bill got annoyed. He wasn't asked, so he didn't get a chance to answer it directly. So he just kind of offhand tosses it out to people afterwards. I think kind of wondering. So like to me, it's like, again, you're reading tea leaves here. You have no idea. But out of one side of his mouth, Kraft's like, I love Mac. And out of the other, he's like, but we could have Lamar, but if Bill wants him, I don't know. It's his call. It's not mine. No big deal. But like, that's kind of putting a lot of pressure on Bill to like, dude, this guy wants to play for you. Are you going to go do something about it? And you almost wonder if behind the scenes, Kraft is like, and we know that relationship is entirely of Kraft owns the team and he knows Bill's good at his job, but they're not like this, and they don't really.
I think they're as close as like two older guys who've worked together as long as they have probably could be.
They don't they don't mix and mingle. We've seen it. You see the Belichick documentary, Kraft walks in his office and he's like, what? So like, I don't know whether he wants to hear Robert coming in and saying stuff to him about football, but I think Kraft feels like, so I kind of got a hot tip. Lamar, what do you think? And Bill's
he hasn't been shy about calling Belichick out for the past few years. With the draft, he even said it today where, a few years ago it was reported that the Patriots overhauled how they were doing drafting because, in not so many words, they were basically saying that Belichick is like making his own picks and disregarding like all this work that the scouting team is putting in and started giving more influence to the younger people on the staff and letting their work show. And obviously their past few drafts have been pretty good. So, again, this is one of those where it's like, this isn't just a thing that Kraft does all the time. Like he's not Jim Irsay. He's not going to have the press conferences where you're like, all right, in all honesty, like, is he okay? Like Kraft says what he means. And as we've seen recently, he's okay with putting little things out there being like, yeah, I'm not super happy with what Bill's doing. He controls things, but I'm just the guy who owns the team. So, what does that mean?
No, I know it's again, it's interesting because it puts Bill in a tight spot here because now it's a thing that's hovering over him and his decision making, but it puts Mac in a tight spot too because before you don't know if he has Bill's endorsement, but you think he's got Kraft's. Now you've got Kraft kind of batting his eyes at a different quarterback. That really creates a ton of uncertainty in the whole situation as Mac's entering camp without Bill saying that he's got the job outright. And let's start with Bill. Let's kind of run the timeline here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Bill's comment again with Mac and Zappi. Actually, maybe we'll go backwards here. Let me see what I'm gonna do first.
This comment section is wild.
What are they mad about?
They're saying that Lamar's a running back, which I'm going to be super honest is either like just completely ignorant on your part if you think he's just a running back, or you have some, maybe personal issues that you need to work out, because to say that Lamar Jackson is just a quarterback or just an arm is so embarrassingly ignorant of you.
Oh my God.
Be super honest
Taylor's getting mad he's coming at you guys.
Yeah, it's stupid. It's really stupid.
I got my money on Taylor.
This is the internet, guys. Like people can see you when you talk like this. You look stupid. Thanks for tuning in, but
let's play. Here's Belichick from June. Here's just one thing in minicamp, and this is just a simple one, but this is minicamp. I'm going all the way back to OTAs, rather.
What role will he have in helping to shape things?
do everything we can really to make it as good for him as we can. He's our quarterback. So.
Very simply, he's our quarterback without much, discussion. Here's Bill going even more overboard. And Amit, when's this from? Put it in the chat. When is this bite from? Sometime during the year, might have been, was it preseason? I forget. He might not be here. This is Bill last year. Okay. Also talking about Mac.
Yeah, I think Mac's done a great job. He's worked extremely hard. He's got a tremendous work ethic, and in all areas, I think there's a dramatic improvement. His physical work and conditioning, working on his mechanics, working on his footwork, working on his understanding of our offense, of opponent defenses, of situations, all those things. We've talked about all those things in varying degrees, some more emphasis than others, and the emphasis on maybe some other things will come later on. We can't do it all at once, but yeah, he's worked hard. Important. He's made tremendous strides, and
that's him gushing.
That's a right good evaluation.
That's the beginning of training camp.
Yeah,
is when that was okay. So that's that. And then today he's just asked, like, is Mac in there, or are we competing, or what's going on here? And this is from the owners' meetings today.
Would it be fair to say that both Mac and Bailey Zappi will be competing for the starting job over the summer, or is it Mac's job?
Yeah, well, everybody get a chance to play. We'll play the best players.
So it's still kind of a competition.
Everybody will get a chance to play.
If it's not a competition, you gain. It either is a competition or it's not, but Bill still wants Mac to think it is. It's one of those two things.
Yeah, I mean, look, a Bill non-answer is never something I want to look into too deeply. Like, yes, I think there's significance when you see him clearly having one sentiment towards another. I'm not arguing against that at all.
It's just past precedent. Like,
absolutely.
One of the most famous sound bites of the last 10 years is poor Giardi asking him whether they would address the quarterback position after the Kansas City debacle, whenever that was, 2016, 20 whatever. And Belichick just looks at him and scoffs. That thing's on documentaries, okay?
Yes.
Tom's our guy. When he with Cam was unequivocally the guy throughout the whole year, even though when he was bad. Well, you're going to play Stidham. Cam's our quarterback. Cam's our quarterback. Cam's our quarterback. I don't want to talk about it. Not talking about it goes against how he's talked about stuff like this before. It's like debating himself here. You don't even have to read into it. He's answered it one way before, and he's answering it differently now.
And I try to think about, go back to Bill's roots. Like, he worked with Parcells, and Parcells was the master of the whole psychological game, and different people need different motivators. Now, there's obviously Belichick is going to yell at everybody. There's that whole thing. But he also, I think, understands how to send certain messages. And he uses the media for that, even if people like to think that all he does is mumble and groan or whatever. So because there is this precedent, we clearly see that there are times where, especially when he was doing that for Cam, when he was doing it for Mac, when he was doing it for Brady, those were low points in their careers where truly it would, especially with Mac, considering he was coming off the whole thing where they didn't know if he was even going to play. And then he kind of had to give him this backing. I think he understands there are situations where this guy needs my full support because he's got the weight of the world crashing down on him and he's doing the best he can. I think last year, maybe Mac, wasn't the best version of himself. I think there were probably maybe points where Belichick was pissed off at how maybe he carried himself or addressed coaches, considering that it was such a different situation that they're used to where Brady can very much do that. And no one's going to question when Brady is ripping a coach, because you have to do a lot for Brady to get so mad that he rips you as someone who's higher on the totem pole. But when Mac does it to someone that Bill has won Super Bowls with, I can understand how that would rub Bill the wrong way. So I think it's very fair to say maybe he's putting Mac on notice to say, I think the whole Mac versus Zappi thing, to me, that's dumb until Mac shows you on the field that he cannot do it, which I don't think is going to happen. That is the debate I don't like having, because I think that literally is just okay, you can win by saying you think it's a real competition, but you win by default because Mac fell off the face of the earth. Yeah. Now, when Lamar's in the conversation, it's different. because this isn't, we don't know what we have. This is, okay, if we keep him healthy, he makes everyone around us better. He makes the organization better. People want to come to your organization. That's maybe something that seems like it's out there and is intangible and people don't like to talk about. But I remember Calvin Johnson interviewed with Bill Perry, and he was saying, I wouldn't want to go to New England right now. Like, if I were playing, I wouldn't want to go there. No offense, but it's just not really a hot spot. Yeah. Other people feel that way. Lamar Jackson, people want to play for Lamar Jackson. And if some veteran who's very good will take even a little bit off to play with Lamar, they're getting that money. Kraft's not afraid of spending money. He just wants good contracts. Same with Bill.
So that's the best point anyone's going to make on it. It's you can be in the Mac camp. First of all, I find it, I mean, let's be honest. You can't compare the two players. You can compare the situations. A cheap quarterback that I can try to load up other places, or an expensive franchise quarterback that takes up an insane amount of my cap space. Then I got to be really smart, draft super well, and my margin of error is a lot smaller.
And Kraft even emphasized the draft today during his presser. He was saying, we've invested money in the wrong places. He said the foundation for building a strong team is the draft. So he's going to
So you got to hit it. He crapped on 3 or 4 drafts. He said they're trending up the last couple. He mentioned that. So it's not the player. And anybody who's like, we don't want Lamar, I'm fine with Mac. Can you pretend right now that the Patriots had drafted Lamar Jackson? He was in his free agent year. Do you think Patriots fans would be like, dump this dude, let's go get that Mac Jones guy? Like, no way would you think that. And it's not a knock on Mac. You're talking about one of the more dynamic players in NFL history, honestly, but like a guy who's a couple years removed from an MVP, who was playing like an MVP through the first 5-6 games of last year. I think it's just, but the thing you said is the best point of all is right now the Pats are not a hot spot. Why would a receiver come here? Like, what is, if they're not going to give someone like DeAndre Hopkins the most money, why would he want this to be his spot to go to a kind of limp offense without a great this and that, and like, I'm not going to put up my stats, and they're not the type of team that feeds a number 1 receiver anyway, and like, it's not exciting. They're not a contender. They might be 4th in the division. Obviously a lot could change, but on paper right now, people are looking at this as worst quarterback in the division, worst team in the division. What am I doing over there? Unless you're paying a ton of money, there isn't a lot of reason. There's no Brady draw anymore. There's no come here to win, sacrifice to win. That was the pull.
There's the Belichick draw, but it's not the same. Like Juju was saying, I came for Belichick, but like, not a lot of players, especially on offense, are coming for Belichick.
It's also hard work. You've heard guys like Donta Hightower, who's a lifetime Patriot and a good soldier and did everything he have to do. At a certain point, he's like, it's hard playing for this team. Like, I've thought about like going elsewhere and like having a little country club ride, just make some money and whatever. I got my rings. Like, maybe I go somewhere where there's just the culture is just like, they just let me do whatever and I can cruise. Like, it's hard being here. You gotta do a lot. You gotta study. You gotta be accountable. Like, it's not necessarily fun. You do it because you want what's at the end of the rainbow, which is a potential Super Bowl.
And like, Brady is the model for it. And even once he got to Tampa, he was like, I would never do that again. Like, that was crazy. Yeah. I mean, like, if Tom Brady's saying it, and he loves New England, he had all the success here. He left and was like, honestly, it's a lot better being down here in Tampa. So, that stuff matters. These are still human beings.
So you're asking a lot of people. So again, this was what just mentioning, the whole back and forth here. This is what Kraft had to say when he was asked about Mac and what was going on, because you got Belichick non-committal, and the feeling has always been Kraft loves the guy. Kraft loves him.
For me, I think I see him as a very hardworking young man. He's in the stadium almost every day now in the off season. I think bringing in Bill O'Brien, I think will work to his advantage, and I'm very positive and hopeful about this upcoming year. And I personally am a big fan of Mac.
He sounds like somebody on this show.
But on top of that, he also said we've done the things. We've made the moves. Another thing they said was we've made the moves which will allow him the opportunity to excel. Basically, like, we've revamped some things that are going to make life better for Mac. That was the general vibe. And then, minutes after that, you get into Meek Mill land. So, things really interesting there in terms of how it went in that direction, in the Lamar direction. And it's impossible not to talk about it because now it's out there. So we're going to get Taylor's fit in terms of how he thinks it needs to go, like for the Patriots to potentially do it. Like, what would they need to move? How would they make it work? And how can it work on the field with their existing personnel? Because it's a different. You're doing something different there. You know, they've run a system, and they've done something in Baltimore to varying degrees of success with the full understanding that Lamar Jackson is their quarterback. Are the Patriots equipped to handle a player like that? And what would they do to kind of their overall scheme, their personnel? Is that somebody Bill O'Brien can or wants to coach? Does it fit with what he wants to do offensively? I don't know. And that's a really interesting question too. Does Bill O'Brien come in here to coach Mac Jones or to coach Lamar Jackson? Oh, you've got to take. We'll get that in a second. First, we want to tell you guys a little bit more about FanDuel. Again, listen up. Wait's over. If you haven't been waiting, or you've been under a rock, by now sports betting has been legalized in Massachusetts. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, is live, and customers get in on the action. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a first $5 bet. Sign up at FanDuel.com/Boston. Bet on all your favorite teams. Super easy. Download the app. It's safe, secure. It's extremely simple to read. The interface is great, so check it out. Like we said, don't miss that chance. $200 bonus bets, win or lose. FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more. America's #1 sportsbook. Now, you got to be 21 to do this. You got to be present in Massachusetts. Present, not living, but present in order to cash in on this deal. $10 deposit required. The bonus is issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Hope is here. Gambling helpline ma.org, or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. So getting back to it on the Lamar stuff, and let's stay here. And then on the tail end, we'll talk about some other things that came out of the availability, and including a succession plan for Bill Belichick that, who knows, could be happening sooner than later. It's really hard to tell, but it's interesting to listen to the owner talk about it, and a few other nuggets. But let's just live in the fantasy land that Lamar Jackson's a possibility, starting with the cap. And I know you hit Miguel, on Twitter, and everybody I'm sure here knows who that is. The capologist, cap expert, who breaks a lot of things down very quickly and very accurately on Twitter. What needs to get done to make it work? How does this work if you wanted to make it happen?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to Miguel's tweet exactly so I make sure I don't misquote him. So this is word for word. A few of the easiest ways for the Patriots to create cap space is to remove highly paid players, i.e. Trent Brown, Hunter Henry, Devontae Parker, or Dietrich Wise from the roster. You can decide for yourself if that is realistic, because that was part of my question. So I think that's pretty fair. I don't think there's a lot of guys. I think Dietrich Wise is the only guy where I'm like, whoa, I really don't want to lose him. That's just because the value he has in terms of versatility, durability, leadership, just play in general. He's been one of their best pass rushers since he was on the team. He's someone who I'd want to keep. Trent Brown, I think he's actually got a pretty good contract, especially if he were to move to right tackle, which Belichick kind of implied is a bit of a possibility. He certainly didn't say it wasn't. But I like Trent Brown. I wouldn't want to lose him, but it just means that you have to address some resources in the draft to filling that hole. But again, that gives you 2 holes at tackle, so I don't love that. Maybe an extension would be better, similar to Hunter Henry. I'd rather give him an extension than I would actually want to get rid of him. And Devontae Parker. Now, he's someone that is great when he's on the field, super talented. We all know that. But we also know that the injury history is very real. And with his play style, where he takes a lot of contact, he jumps up and falls down really hard a lot, you can't count on him being there for you most of the season. So that's a guy where, none of the, obviously it's a trade. You don't want to lose certain people. But if you're getting Lamar Jackson, he just makes so much easier in terms of how you build your roster. Harder in the sense of he takes up a lot of your money, so you got to get clever. But to be fair, with those big contracts, especially guaranteed contracts with these big quarterbacks, every year, if the team comes to them and says, like, hey, we're trying to get you some weapons, would you mind, converting some of this to a signing bonus? Those quarterbacks are always willing to restructure their contract year to year, because teams just push you back and make sure, like, I'm still getting my money, but, you're not messing with that. It's just going to create more room.
You're paying for it at some point.
Exactly. Like Belichick even said, like with the cap, it all evens out. That's the point of all that.
The tax comes due, and
Right.
you see some teams dealing with it. I mean, Tampa's got to go through it this year, basically.
But that's the thing. That's the thing. One, like obviously, I don't know what Brady's situation did to that, but when the cap isn't crap is when you have bad contracts. If you have good contracts, you're fine, because it's somebody that you want to keep, so you extend them. You don't want them, you cut them, and you probably don't lose money because it was a smart contract.
But again,
Well,
you keep deferring it and you keep kicking the can down the road. Eventually, you got to clean house. Like I said,
yeah.
Tampa's going through it, but they'll be able to purge themselves in a year and probably get themselves back. Once
And it
they get,
evens out in the years where you do have all the money. So you're
yeah.
like, all right, now this is where we push all
So
the money. We
they'll
got
eat
our
shit for a
guys.
year and then they'll come back. But yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
And
And
so
with a guy like Lamar, you can stomach that because, like, yeah, the roster is going through a bit of a rebuild. We lose a couple key pieces, but you
But
got
you got
Lamar.
massive. This is where not having people on the books for 24 comes into play.
Mhm.
You have space next year. You're not
Yeah.
going to be paying for it. You got to clear it for this year, but it's actually going to work for you.
And Miguel said that the Ravens would like a team that signs him to a lower cap hit in 2023 because they have less than 40 million in cap space. So they're looking for something that's more affordable in the real house. And again, that's gonna kick off a transition for them. So they're not going to be trying to pay a ton of money this year anyway.
Yep.
Obviously, free agency's done. It's not like they can go out and get some big names or anything like that. But yeah, so this is a situation that could very much be in the Patriots' favor. They don't pay a lot of money now, more money when they actually have
Does it make sense for Mac to be involved in this transaction
Um,
if it happened?
I mean, sure. I don't see why not, especially because the Ravens, a lot of their scouting process and a lot of the things they look for really do fall in line with Belichick's philosophy because he helped invent it. When the Ravens were founded, he literally, like, their draft blueprint, the whole Ray Lewis, Orlando Brown, like, that was Belichick's plan. So they're very similar philosophically. Obviously, that would mean the Ravens need to change how they kind of build their offense. They need to invest significantly more at receiver. But you got Mark Andrews. You're at least built to run the ball. So there's certain things that you can mesh well with Mac. It's already a run-first team, although I know I forget who they got on offense, but they changed coordinators. But I think it's, Mac is a smart quarterback. He's still someone where if you don't surround him with dog poop, he'll do well. And I don't want it to get lost in this conversation like Mac is this guy who can't play in the NFL. Anything that we've seen points to him being a guy who could be a Pro Bowl quarterback in the right, situation where it's not actively working against him. The only times we've seen him really struggle are when he's been a rookie and when he was given a defensive coordinator as offensive coordinator. When he was under Nick Saban, he led one of the best offenses in college football history. And he was a first-round pick for a reason. So he's still a very good player. If you want to move on from him and create a less weird situation, you got Bailey Zappi. So at least you have one quarterback where you have to change the scheme, but they can still operate within the core of your offense. So, yeah, if you want to move on from Mac, I think it's probably better. But at the same time, you got a quarterback who you have
They
control
screwed
over
themselves
still,
here
so,
because if you're going to do that, you could have moved him to quarterback needy teams who have already committed money other places. So that's you're not.
So you keep him for a year and you are paying him as much.
You're
as
not
rookie,
in a great negotiating position, but you keep Mac here for a year and he just sits there and stares at Lamar the whole year. That'll be weird, but
I mean, winning cures all. What's Matt going to do? Complain that the starting quarterback has gotten them to a 12-win season?
I wanted to chime in. The point you mentioned with Mac before and like where Belichick might have gotten annoyed. I really do think like the Mac outwardly undermining and complaining about the assistants was a tacit shot at Bill, who put them in place. So Bill's got to be like, I know I effed this up. You're making it 1,000 times worse. And that looks bad on me. So the more you yell, the more you undress these guys and make it clear that the quarterback's not down with them, the worse I look here. So you're killing me right now. I don't know how much of that kind of sat in and stuck with him, but yeah, it's interesting. So let's talk about it on the field. Let's say you clear the space, you make it happen, you bring them on here. How does it work? Can the Patriots transition into the type of offense that suits Lamar's skill set? And how does Bill O'Brien play in here?
Well, yeah, because Bill O'Brien already did it. He did it with Deshaun Watson. Now, to be fair, I was watching Deshaun's offense with Bill O'Brien to see how much he used his skill set versus how much was kind of traditional Patriots. In Deshaun's first year with O'Brien, it was a lot of the traditional stuff. Like, you weren't seeing a lot of pistol or a lot of the things that Deshaun did in college outside of some of the running things. There was a little bit of that. But a lot of the core was still what he was doing in New England and that whole system, because that's what he did at Penn State. The longer he was with Deshaun, you started seeing a lot of the offense started to change. More guys in the backfield, more pistol sets, a lot more moving the pocket and things that went more with what Deshaun did well. Because I'm sure, he probably just wanted to build a base for him as a rookie and then put more on his plate as he, grew and players developed differently. I think O'Brien would be able to do it because a lot of the things that Deshaun does well, Lamar does well too. Now, different people like different routes and concepts and things like that. So I'd need to do a real deep dive to see if conceptually it's the same. But Bill O'Brien's a great offensive coordinator. Like, you put your players in the best position to succeed. The plays are largely already there, or he has experience running those types of plays and putting a mobile quarterback in the best position and actually, playing at a high level, even though the pieces around him weren't great. Especially with the Texans, they had, obviously Fuller was great, Hopkins was great, but there wasn't a lot around them. The offensive line wasn't very good, which made the run game inconsistent. The protection wasn't great. And the Patriots are much more well set in terms of balance. So I think it's be a pretty easy transition for O'Brien. I think there'd be a lot of collaboration and, Lamar being able to say, okay, I like this, I don't like this. But at the core, it's important to remember that especially last year, Lamar was a legitimate pocket passer. Like, his first few years, there definitely was more of the, okay, let's use his mobility. But more when you saw him run last year was when teams started to get away from them. And it was like, all right, we really need to put some plays up on the board, or we need something to happen. Deshaun, can we run GT counter with you like 5 times on this drive against the Patriots? That's exactly what you saw. They were doing a pretty good job against it for most of the game, especially when they were in man. Then the Ravens had one drive where they just ran Lamar like 3 or 4 times and the Patriots couldn't stop it. Like, that's what he gives you. But that's the running ability is a nice bonus, but he's still a very good pocket passer. You want to go on my Twitter, I had a ton of plays where it's Lamar winning with eye discipline, where he's looking to one side of the field specifically to move a defender, looking back to the other, and the person's open because of him, or even if it's a tight window, he's fitting it in. Like, the touch, the ball placement are great. So he can be the pocket passer you want. Then you just mix in some of the things to take advantage of his legs. I don't think that would be very hard.
And you'll be seeing more of that on CLNS media as the Lamar train keeps rolling on. Until somebody puts the brakes on. And there's a bunch of teams interested because lost in all of this earlier was Lamar kind of, crafted his own exit here by basically putting it out there that he's requested a trade at this point because it's not going the way they wanted and he's not getting what he wants out of there. And, the Colts, Ballard chimed in from the owners' meetings as well. So you got to take a look. The thing is, though, nobody's really taken a look yet. So it is interesting that it's kind of been sitting there for a while and no one's really moved. You're curious what's going to happen there. But it's hard to pass up. And I think all of the things you mentioned, not just the talent, but being relevant again, these guys have to make some sort of splash. And I don't know whether it's the smartest play or not, but I think, and again, you and I differ a little bit here, but I think you stand pat and you just go through the motions with the roster you have and then just hope you draft really well and pick up a couple of pieces and scraps here and there. I just don't think you've got what it takes to compete in the division and in the AFC on a level that's really going to, I think your ceiling is is playoffs, maybe. And that's very optimistic. And again, it's not like odds makers know everything, but never in Belichick's life have they ever had longer odds to get going anywhere. I mean, this is as low a view as people on the outside have had of this team. Doesn't mean it's going to be this way, but right now it doesn't have a lot of juice, doesn't have a lot of traction. Winning changes everything. They run the lineup they have out there. Bill O'Brien make a couple good draft picks, crafty moves, and they surprise some people. Yeah, the narrative changes. But at this point, it looks kind of bleak to a lot of people from the outside, and some people who are very optimistic on the inside may have, who cover the team on a regular basis may have a different view. But the relevance and the juice and getting people to want to play here and getting yourself back on the map here, I think matters. We look at that maybe not enough, getting people to give a crap about you, to look your way. They're not that right now. They're an afterthought. Nobody's looking at the Patriots that way right now.
I mean, yeah, my thoughts. It's not over. Still plenty of pieces to be added. All the cliches that I've been saying for days. Yeah. But obviously, Lamar raises the floor enough that, you legitimately are in talks to being, I'd say, arguably, I think with that defense, better special teams, the coaching, I think that's legitimately you could be the best team in the division. Because I think Lamar can go toe-to-toe with Josh Allen. He can go toe-to-toe with Aaron Rodgers. He could beat Tua. I can go toe-to-toe with Tyreek Hill. I think that's more of a fair way to put it.
Yeah.
Obviously, Lamar's incredible. He makes you a lot better and lowers the necessity for you to have great players. Obviously, we've seen in Baltimore, Mark Andrews is fantastic. Fantastic. But they've never had somebody other than him who could consistently produce, and Lamar is still one MVP. Obviously it's injuries, but he's still putting up great numbers and trying to adapt when he's put in some pretty tough positions. So, you've seen Lamar's, I think, like basement in Baltimore, and you would hope it would never be that bad in New England. And that shows you how good they can be. And this is someone who hasn't even scratched his surface yet, or his ceiling yet. Like he can do so much more, so much room for growth.
It's so tantalizing. And again, from where I sit, and I'm not sitting here pretending I do what you do or what Evan Lazar does in terms of the amount of film breakdown and this and that. But I will say, just philosophically, the idea of a quarterback who isn't at least athletic and able to make plays individually in some way is something that I don't know that you can survive with much longer in the NFL. I just don't think that those guys exist anymore. I think Drew Brees is probably the last of them. But like, even you're not talking about Joe Burrow being Lamar Jackson, but the guy is an athlete. He keeps plays alive. He does things on his own. I think Mac needs things to be really perfect around him in order to make things work. And the idea of like what you can have with a dynamic playmaking person who can extend plays and do things just on their own gives you so many outs, and you just don't have them unless you've got a quarterback that can do that.
I will say this in Mac's defense, and I'm not going to sit here and act like he is Lamar Jackson or he's Joe Burrow, but when I was working at Next Gen, no, but it's not even that. When I was working at Next Gen, like for every week since I think he came back from his injury, he had the highest pressure evasion rate in the league. Yeah. He actually last year was, I don't want to say blessing in disguise because there was so much bad and like so much that held him back. But one thing that came from him having a terrible offensive line for a lot of the year, or just terrible protection, I don't want to say the line, it was individual things, but he was making some pretty crazy play extensions. Now, the thing is, he needs to be better about making decisions once he escapes pressure. Obviously, he doesn't have the athleticism to make crazy off-platform throws. Not many people do. Even athletic quarterbacks don't necessarily mean that they can throw on the run. And, I think he needs to rein it in when it comes to, okay, I have escape pressure, now what? But I do want to say that give Mac his credit. When it comes to, like, pocket passers, he's easily one of the best and, like, better than a lot of most veteran quarterbacks, other than, like, the guys we're talking about every week who you just expect in that conversation. Just saying that in terms of his pocket elusiveness. But, yes, obviously, he's not Burrow. He's not Jackson. Those guys are on a different level. I just don't want this to turn in the comment section like ripping Mac. Because he's just done everything he could. Not you, the comments.
Yeah. I've always thought philosophically, just the NFL has evolved to the point where that the quarterback's got to be one of the better athletes, has to be a really outstanding athlete who can do things on their own when things go to hell. And it gives you a huge advantage when they do. And when you
get a receiver who can do that for them.
Yeah. When you don't have it, I think it really, if you go around the league, you're just not going to see very many of them be successful who can't do a little bit on their own at the very least. But
Joe Burrow looks a lot better extending the play than throwing downfield to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase.
Yeah,
than Mac does doing it, throwing to Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah,
and,
no, I hear you.
It's
I hear you.
Give and take.
So with the Lamar stuff, we'll see where it goes. Other things that were interesting here. I think just Kraft talking about Bill. It's interesting, and again, we're not really sure where a lot of this is going to go, but I know he's kind of put him on notice recently, as you said, a lot of, pressure to that. And I think the tone of that relationship right now is very much Bill Belichick is like, I've been spoken to, I've been told I messed up. I know I messed up.
He was saying to himself, he said, if this goes bad, it's my fault. And it went real bad.
But he also just, it was an experiment. Kraft called it an experiment that went bad. I feel bad for Matty P. We tried it. It was obviously bad. I mean, he told Bill he did bad. He told Bill to go get an OC. He told Bill, you're going to keep Gerard Mayo and you're going to give him a promotion and you're going to call and he's going to have prominence in this organization. So the two things that are interesting is both kind of the conversation surrounding Gerard Mayo and which way it's going to go. But the other thing that got headlines that was kind of the big talker today before all the Lamar stuff was Bill Belichick asked directly about why there should be reason for optimism around this team. It was just such an interesting answer. It took me forever wrapping my mind around whether I thought it was the most brilliant answer or like, you got to be kidding me. So again, you've probably seen it or heard it or seen it written, but here's what Bill had to say about why should there be a reason for optimism surrounding this team in 2023.
You've talked in the past about how media is a conduit to the fans, between the team and the fans. If you Do you have any? Would you say anything to the fans right now as to where the team sits and what you're trying to put together? What would you say to them right now if they were listening to this?
Long way to go. It's March. We play in September. A long way to go. A lot of work to do.
And what would you say to them to give them a reason to be optimistic for what's ahead for the Patriots?
The last 25 years.
Drops it, you know.
I love that he didn't even laugh. He was just like, "Yeah, no, seriously, I'm that dude." What are you talking about?
So again, I put up a little meager Twitter poll out there just asking about it. Just what do you guys think? Was that the greatest answer of all time, or like what have you done for me lately? It was fairly split. I think most people are like, yeah, it doesn't matter, but both things are true. Yeah. Here's the one thing that's 1,000% true. People have been wrong about Bill Belichick, his construction of the roster and the future of the Patriots and what they thought was going to happen for 15 years. They've called the end of the dynasty. They've been calling the end of the dynasty since like 2013. Okay. And every year it was proven wrong, even when in season they started. Okay. But it's a different world. Tom Brady is gone. They've had losing seasons 2 out of 3. They've had a bunch of dud drafts, and you just came off a year where you literally just put your 2 pals in to really critical positions and screwed the whole season up. Like literally just tossed a season away of potential development of players, of your quarterback. Might have destroyed his confidence forever. I'm not saying I don't know what happened, but you really were playing with fire, doing something like wildly irresponsible. And I don't know that you get to be cavalier at this point. Like you're kind of like I'm not going to say hot seat, but you can't do this again. Like it's got to work now. Like it's got to go back to I'm right about everything and I'm the best coach ever. You can't have another season. This team goes 7 and whatever. It's bad. So like everything's got to be different than that. I don't know that attitude. And again, I'll always put this out there. And I think Jaylen Brown just went through it too with some reporters as well. There are some people that just don't want to give it up to reporters. You're not going to get me to do your dance. I'm not going to say the thing you want me to say, but then they end up somehow backing themselves into corners and saying something that gets blown up even bigger than if they had just answered the question in the first place. I think that's kind of what happened here. He's like, I don't want to friggin' answer you. I'm not giving you what you want. I'm not going to rah-rah this team and tell you why we're going to be awesome. I just don't want to answer this anymore. So he just said scoreboard and then moved on.
And I mean, I think we're insane if we think that a man who has 6 Super Bowl rings as the head coach of this team, he has more than that. I think anybody with that many rings is going to have a pretty big ego. I'm not saying he's an egomaniac, but I mean, like, yeah, like you're going to have, I mean, he's gotten himself enough, of a resume to be able to kind of say whatever he wants. Now, it does lack a little bit of, self-awareness recently. While I don't think he's on the hot seat, like, yeah, if he tanks next season, like, yeah, he's on the hot seat. But, like, that's because this team is much better. Going into last season, people didn't really think they were going to be a playoff team. It was if they do, it'd be a freaking miracle. Because the weapons are okay, but, like, what are they doing on offense?
Wait, they made it the year before. I don't think that's right. I think the expectation was improvement this year.
I don't know. Oh, okay, maybe. I remember I was optimistic that they would be okay with Patricia. But I don't know if people were thinking they were going to be like really good last year. So the offensive problems were underestimated because clearly that was inarguably horrendous.
You're right in the sense that before camp began, there was optimism. As soon as it started, within a few days, everyone was like, "Uh-oh."
Right.
And I am not that guy who's breaking down every single snap and like talking about who won, battle drills between O-line and D-line, but I've covered 20-something camps. I have never seen the story go the way it went this past year as quickly as it did, which is like, what in the F are they doing? And you could tell it was a discombobulated mess on offense. To the trained or the untrained eye. It was impossible to talk about anything else. Every single day it was the offense is scary bad and it's getting late. It's getting late early, and it lasted all camp, and it never went away. And it was so obvious.
And I think this last season was the first season where I really think you look at Bill and you're like, that was your fault.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so look at 2019. The offense had Josh Gordon, Antonio Brown, Julian Edelman, and Philip Dorsett as their number 4. Like, that was a really good looking team when they started 2019. Obviously, they ended the season trading a second round pick for Mohamed Sanu. Like, that was them just seemingly trying to save face. So that was even a situation where you're like, yeah, you kind of got screwed by Antonio Brown, his whole situation. Josh Gordon couldn't be there for you the whole season. And then you had a crazy dearth of weapons. That was a tough situation. COVID year happens. You have several key players who opt out understandably. So once again, and you have a new quarterback. So you're gutted and you don't really have – that's why they had all the money that they spent on Jonnu and Henry and everybody. They had it because they didn't spend it before because they didn't know that they would have as many holes as they did and couldn't fill them. So that's another season where you say, okay, you give Bill the benefit of the doubt. He's Bill Belichick, lost a bunch of key players, in a COVID season, which just seems like a asterisk next to it anyway. And then the season after that is Mac's rookie year. And they make the playoffs for the first time since 2019. So you're thinking, okay, they're on the rise. So I don't think before this there was a real – Belichick was legitimately on the hot seat. Obviously the drafting part, like Bill the GM got his talking to. I think Bill the coach was doing the best he could with what he had. Last season, it's like, no, you decided to give your second-year quarterback an almost impossible situation to work around because you thought you were – I don't want to say you thought you were smart enough. I feel like that's too condescending. But, you thought you could make this really weird situation work that's never worked before. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. In Bill we trust because he's earned that. But it was clearly something that no one could overcome. And that's where it's like, okay, yeah, no, dude, seriously, now that you got the coaches, you got some good players, the defense has all its starters back, and you can add pieces. Now it's put up or shut up. If you don't make the playoffs and look competitive versus going to the playoffs and getting like spanked by the time the fourth quarter hits and there's really no hope of coming back, that's when it's like, all right, now, Bill, your job is in jeopardy and they may need to move on. So I don't think before this that was a real concern. I think Belichick was doing the best he could with some really difficult hands that he was dealt.
Yeah.
But last year obviously was a completely different thing, and that's where you start to say, all right, man, you got to earn that credit back.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a big year for Bill. And the question, hot seat or not hot seat, again, I'm not sure. I don't think hot seat's ever fair. Kraft has never intimated it. But the votes of confidence are, I'm not going to say they're just not as resounding. He's talking about him, but like, again, you guys judge. Here's Kraft talking about, Bill Belichick and just kind of their relationship.
Are you as confident in Bill leading your football operation as you were 5 years ago?
Look,
Pause.
I think Bill is exceptional at what he does, and I've given him the freedom to make the choices and do the things that need to be done. And his football intellect and knowledge is unparalleled from what I've seen. And just when you talk to him, the small things analytically that he looks at. But in the end, this is a business. You either execute and win or you don't. And, that's where we're at. I think we're in a transition phase. I think we've made some moves this year that I personally am comfortable with. And I still believe in Bill.
There it is. It's pretty positive.
Here's the tip off. Anytime someone is asked a yes or no question and they don't answer with yes or no, you kind of get your answer. Okay. So when it's that simple. Are you confident in Bill? If the answer is yes, you lead with that. Yes, absolutely. When you give a long preamble and then get to where he got to, but it's a results oriented business, he basically just said, yeah, the guy's the best, but he's got to show it now. So, and the other thing he said is we're in a transition period. You're not supposed to be in a transition period anymore. The transition happened 3 years ago when Tom Brady left, and you transitioned You had a bridge year with Cam. Then you transitioned to a new quarterback. Then you had success with that quarterback. And then last year was supposed to be growth. You're supposed to be here. He's saying they're still here.
That's nitpicking
bad.
because it is a transition because last year didn't count. It was literally a lost year.
But
So
matter.
you have a new offensive coordinator. How is that not a transition?
It wasn't like a natural disaster happened. Bill happened last year.
And that's why, again, that's why what I was going to say was that I think Kraft gave the answer, the more nuanced answer that maybe Bill should have given. That like, yeah, I'm great, but like I screwed the pooch last year. And I think that Kraft, like obviously it would have been politically correct for him to say, yes, Bill's the best. But he did have the caveat of it's a business. You win or you lose. Bill feels the same way. I don't think if Bill got fired after a 7-9 season, whatever the hell these records are now, 8-9 or whatever, I don't think he's, going to be saying, screw you, Kraft. It's, I clearly lost a step. I can't compete in the NFL right now if that's what the result's going to be. So I don't really see it as him giving this, cryptic, drawn-out answer. I think he was honestly just candid and nuanced in saying that Bill is amazing. Of course, I have all the confidence in the world in him, but yeah, dude, like I'm still a person and you're still human. If you screw up again to the degree you did last year with a much better situation, then conversations need to be had.
Again, it's simply relative to what he's said about Bill through the history of time up until very recently, which is we know he's the best, but at this point, I'm looking at 3 years without the results we're hoping for. Snuck into the playoffs 1 year, but we went backwards last year. We go backwards again. I have to start to think about the direction of this organization.
And that's fair.
What you also have going is Bill Belichick asked a series of questions. What's Bill O'Brien's role? I like Bill. Okay, great. And then he asked.
He wasn't talking about coach. He said he wasn't going to talk about coaches until the spring.
Exactly. And then he's asked this. What about Gerard? Does he have a title? No, not yet. What about this? Not going to talk about it. We'll talk about it in the spring. So
Tommy Curran was getting after him.
Tom tried like 12 different ways. So then you have that where Belichick won't talk about it, but he's forced to write a statement naming O'Brien an offensive coordinator, though he's still not named that on the team website and on the masthead or the whatever. And then elevating Gerard Mayo to a position that has not been announced yet or created, and it's not really clear what it's going to be. And these are both clearly Kraft doings. So there's a strong belief that Mayo is the successor, and Mayo was promised, you're the guy, stay here. And you've got a lot of curious things going on, like no spending into 2024 and like open books and this and that. And I do think a lot of things point to fix it with what you got. I'm not letting you do any more stuff here until we see if this is working. So here's Kraft on Mayo, okay?
Yeah, Gerard is a individual. I think there's no ceiling on his ability to grow and how competent he is. We had the privilege of having him as a player, and I saw how intense he was and his leadership skills that he had on the field, and then saw him leave us and go into private industry and learn the X's and O's of business, and then come back and be a coach and do that with us. And good coaches get hired away, so I was happy we were able to sit with him and try to keep him here long term, and I'm going to do everything I can to try to make that happen.
He also continued on saying that he's going to be a good head coach, and we don't have it here, and possibly here. We don't know. He kind of alluded to like, and hopefully that's going to be here. As an aside, Mayo, I got to work with him for a couple of years when he was doing stuff with us over on Quick Slants on NBC. That dude, man, is one of the funniest, smartest guys. He just comes in and everybody stops and you just listen to what he has to say. He's so quick-witted. He's got so much personality. He's so freaking smart and engaging and funny and dynamic personality.
Excited to meet him.
He's amazing. And you can get why people are. I mean, he's much more straight-laced when he's behind the scenes with Bill, but he's still that guy. That's just who he is. And so you can tell why the players, and probably in addition to his smarts and his understanding, and he was a very cerebral player as well. So he has every single trait you would want out of a head coach, but he's also just such a funny dude. Anyway, but that kind of there's Bill knows the guy's right there.
And I don't think it's like I think so. How I see this,
it's not a rivalry, but he knows.
But I think I think if Belichick really does struggle this year, I think what we're going to see is a transition of power. If that happens, and they really are again in the playoffs, and they get blown out, I think really that's all it's going to take. That's when I think Kraft, Belichick have a discussion where Kraft is saying, I will give you 1 year to help Gerard transition to your role. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, hot seat, he's fired.
Whispers, this might be the year.
Maybe. Honestly, maybe. I 100% agree. And again, I think it may be honestly smarter to say that. To say this is the year where you have all the pieces. If you don't make it happen, I still think if that is this year and he doesn't do well, that it's going to be one true transition, because Belichick is still one of the smartest people the game has ever known. His knowledge base is still important, even if that means Gerard takes over massive amounts of responsibility and Belichick's more of a figurehead who's advising him. Whatever you want to do for PR reasons, that's it. But I'm confident in the fact that we know that they have a successor on the roster who is in that, Kraft bubble of, he will protect this person at all costs. Especially with someone like Gerard, who was brought up in the organization, career Patriot, becomes a coach, brilliant in all other ventures where he can talk to Kraft about more than just ball. He's not going anywhere. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be like Bill's fired. I think they're going to have an honest conversation, and Kraft's going to be like, dude, what's good? And if Bill doesn't have it, he's just going to retire.
When they part ways is when Kraft's asks of Bill are more than Bill's willing to give up, which is, can you cede some personnel responsibilities and just focus on
Great
this?
point.
Can you do that? And they're just like, or should we just call it? And they'll call it. Bill's never getting fired, ever. Never.
However they phrase it, he's not getting fired.
no way. But at some point, they might have to have an uncomfortable conversation, and how that conversation goes and how it ends, you never know. But then again,
happened to Tom.
You're still dealing with the smartest, football mind that's ever existed. And at this point, I again, if you're looking at that team, you still think the one advantage you have going into every Sunday is Belichick, and letting go of that. You never know what it's going to be on the other side. Even if there's certain aspects of the game that I know there's a lot of people that are like, he's old, it's passing him by, judging talent, X, Y, and Z, the way he runs it, maybe his mentality, maybe he's stubborn. I can see criticisms there, but if he rights the ship and everything starts going in the right direction, and no one's going to think about any of that stuff again, it'll look more like a blip. But if it keeps going in the wrong direction, I think people are going to start to make some conclusions, and Kraft is kind of on that doorstep right now. So we'll see where it goes. We've talked enough. We're going to wrap it up. It's getting late, at least for me. T. Kyles hasn't even had dinner yet. But we are, like I said, check CLNS Media for all of the written work. We'll have more on Lamar Jackson coming up on the site tomorrow as well. In addition to some draft previews and profiles, which are going to start getting up. We're going to really dig into that a little bit. But we'll be following this story closely like everybody else. If it moves right now, it's just Robert Kraft just talking about getting texted by a rapper who's far from a source that is necessarily one that we'd find reliable. So Meek Mill, Robert Kraft, Lamar Jackson, that's what happened today. We'll see what happens after that. So, but yeah, that's all we got. Once again, we'll tell you guys, check out FanDuel. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, FanDuel.com/Boston, go through that URL, take advantage of a special offer. Bet 5, win 200 in bonus bucks instantly, win or lose. Doesn't matter what happens to that bet. And you can play around with those bonus bets for a couple of weeks and see what you get out of it. FanDuel.com/Boston. Check it out. Taylor, Kyles, John Zannis, we will see